Everyone please stand for the Shiamaru Tribal Government Preamble. The Shiamaru Tribal Government Preamble will start in 5 seconds. We the people of the Aboriginal Republic of North America.
We the people of the Aboriginal Republic of North America.
Asserting our natural Aboriginal rights.
Asserting our natural Aboriginal rights.
As the oldest recorded Aboriginal Indigenous people of the Americas.
As the oldest recorded Aboriginal Indigenous people of the Americas.
Consisting of an Aboriginal union of Indigenous people living in accord with natural law.
Consisting of an Aboriginal union of Indigenous people living in accord with natural law.
The law of our ancestors.
The law of our ancestors.
Do hereby recognize all nationals of the Aboriginal Republic of North America as a unified community.
Do hereby recognize all nationals of the Aboriginal Republic of North America as unified community.
Establish our divine right to self-rule.
Establish our divine right to self-rule.
A common defense of our nation.
A common defense of our nation.
A complete unified will for progress.
A complete unified will for progress.
And prosperity by and for our people.
And prosperity by and for our people.
Establishing justice by way of natural law and equality.
Establishing justice by way of natural law and equality.
And complete autonomy as a nation.
And complete autonomy as a nation.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Ali for President.org.
Vote for Dr. Ali so that he can secure reparations for the so-called African American.
Reparations for the so-called African American is the most important political issue of our nation today.
We need an Aboriginal labor law.
We need an Aboriginal labor law bill.
Labor law obligations that require
Labor law obligations that require
at least one Aboriginal worker on the job site.
At least one Aboriginal American in the workplace.
Per every 5 employees.
Per every 5 employees.
And harsh penalties for contractors that discriminate against Aboriginal workers.
And harsh penalties against contractors that discriminate against Aboriginal Americans.
Denationalization is an act to take away a group of people's identity. Please help us help ourselves.
Support Ali, man.
Why sing so much? Every night's a celebration for the Speak a little bit about your parents and their experience with the so-called as African Americans in this country.
Well, first of all, I'm fortunate enough to have lived with my great-grandmother, who was born 14 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, like 1864. So to have lived with someone who had almost experienced slavery was quite a blessing for me. I learned a lot sitting around a fireplace, listening to her describe much of her life experience. And even during my early childhood, when I lived in South Alabama under the veil of segregation, it was quite an experience. When I moved to Newark in the 50s, it was the first time that I've ever had an interracial experience with white people. I had never in Alabama ever rode or sat next to a white person. I had never eaten in a dining room or in a restaurant with a white person. I had never gone to school with a white person. So my whole interracial experience came here in Newark, where I've been since the early or mid-50s.
Tell us a little bit about your great-grandparent.
My great-grandmother.
Your great-grandmother. Tell us some happy things about her and some morality that she installed in you.
Well, first and foremost, there was very little to be happy about. when you lived in a 3-room shack where you had no running water, you had an outhouse for a bathroom, no heat, no electricity, and you had to read and live by candlelight and lamplight after dark, there was nothing to be happy about with that. But still, there was a spirit of survival because you had to make do with what you had. And you grew your food, particularly your vegetables, and if you was lucky enough had to have money or to buy from someone who either raised chickens, killed chickens, or hogs, that became your meat. So I remember through my early grade school years that I used to sit by the fireplace and do my homework by candlelight. I remember in the winter when it was cold that the only way to survive the heat that we had to burn wood and heat irons to put in the bed and wrap them with cloth. And those people who may view this and have lived in those conditions can understand that. My kids today, I have 5 children, and I have taken them to where I used to live. Fortunately, I was able to get pictures from the area where I lived before they destroyed the houses. With the advent of segregation taking place, or forthcoming in Brown versus Brown, one shrewd thing about white people is that they plan ahead. That is why every major city has what is called a master plan. They look 25 years in advance. They saw this coming. So the area where I lived, what I used to call it, today I refer to it as a reservation, because I lived in an area that was surrounded by white residents. It was a pocket of black people, maybe about 20, 30 houses of family that lived there. So in order to go to grade school, I had to walk through a white section, and to return home, it was the same thing. So when the city decided that they was going to confiscate people's land through eminent domain, because they knew that the segregation of schools would come through Brown versus Brown after the Supreme Court had rendered that decision, that's when they implemented the idea of condemning those houses and removing them out of that so they could avoid segregation. So today, my kids are aware of my experience, and what they do today, since they have been very much aware of my past, they can appreciate where I came from and where they are today by comparison.